The cold night Marcus stood in the middle of a vast frozen landscape. His breath came out in thick clouds, disappearing into the cold night air. The moon above was a pale, distant light, casting eerie shadows across the snowy ground. He had been walking for hours, trying to find shelter from the harsh winds that cut through his clothes. The planet he had landed on was beautiful, but it was freezing. He knew he needed to find warmth before the cold overtook him. His boots crunched in the snow with every step as he trudged along. The wind howled through the trees, bending them in strange shapes like the twisted fingers of some forgotten giant. The trees here were unlike anything he had ever seen on Earth, tall and dark, their branches swaying like ghostly arms. The air smelled fresh but also strange, with a hint of something he couldn't quite place, something floral and sweet yet unfamiliar. Marcus checked his communicator again. No signal. His ship's systems were down and his backup plans had failed. He was completely alone on this alien world. He had been sent here on a mission of exploration, but now he was just trying to survive. He couldn't help but feel the weight of isolation pressing down on him. He had come here to learn, to uncover the mysteries of space, but now he was wondering if he would ever make it back home. The night was starting to take its toll. His fingers were numb, and his legs ached with every step. He needed shelter, but there was nothing in sight. The snow was getting deeper, and he had no choice but to push forward, hoping for some sign of a safe place. Then, just as he was about to give up, he saw it. A small flicker of light appeared in the distance, barely visible through the snow and the trees. It was faint, almost like a fire, but Marcus wasn't sure. Could it be someone else? Another explorer, or perhaps a native of this strange world? He couldn't be certain, but he didn't have much choice. He needed warmth, and this light was his only hope. He quickened his pace, careful not to slip on the icy ground. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and fear. As he drew closer, the light grew brighter, and soon he could make out the shape of a small fire burning at the edge of a clearing. The crackling sound of the flames reached his ears, and he felt a sense of relief wash over him. But as he stepped into the clearing, his breath caught in his throat. By the fire sat a figure, a strange alien woman, huddled in the snow. She was not human. Her skin was a soft shade of green, like the moss that grew on the damp stones back home. Her hair was long, shimmering silver in the firelight, and her eyes glowed a brilliant blue, reflecting the flames. She looked fragile, like a creature out of a dream, and she was staring into the fire with a haunted expression. Marcus froze, unsure of what to do. The woman didn't seem to notice him at first, lost in her own thoughts. She was wrapped in tattered clothes, clearly not prepared for the harsh conditions of the planet. The fire in front of her was small, barely enough to keep her warm. Marcus could see that she was shivering, her body trembling with cold. "Hello?" Marcus called out, his voice cautious but loud enough for her to hear. He didn't want to startle her, but he had no idea what else to do. The alien woman's head snapped up, her glowing blue eyes locking onto his. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly she stood up, her body swaying slightly as if she was too weak to remain standing. Marcus took a cautious step forward, keeping his distance, trying to gauge the situation. He didn't know what kind of creature she was or what she might do, but something told him that she wasn't a threat. She studied him carefully, her eyes scanning him from head to toe. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her gaze. Fear, curiosity. She didn't speak, but her lips parted slightly as if she were about to say something. Instead, she just held out her hand, palm up, toward him. Marcus hesitated. He had never encountered an alien before, and he didn't know the proper protocol. Should he reach out to her? Was it safe? But then the cold hit him again, sharper this time, and he couldn't deny the aching numbness in his fingers and toes. He needed warmth, and she seemed to offer it. Slowly, he walked closer to the fire. As he approached, she lowered her hand and motioned for him to sit beside her. It was an unexpected gesture, and Marcus was unsure of what to make of it. Was she simply trying to help, or was there something more to this? Either way, he needed the warmth. So he sat down carefully, just far enough to not crowd her. The fire crackled between them, the flames dancing in the wind. It was a strange moment, one filled with both tension and a quiet, unspoken understanding. They sat in silence, both lost in their own thoughts, staring into the fire. The woman seemed to be watching the flames, lost in memories, while Marcus struggled to process everything that had happened so far. Then, after a long pause, she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Are you cold?" she asked, her tone a little shaky, as if she were unsure whether to speak at all. Marcus blinked, surprised by the question. "Yes," he replied honestly. I need warmth." The alien woman nodded as if she had expected that answer. She then turned toward him, her movements slow and deliberate. In one smooth motion, she unwrapped a large, thick sleeping bag from her back and spread it on the snow beside her. "You can share this," she said quietly, her eyes watching him for any sign of hesitation. Marcus looked at her, then at the sleeping bag. He wasn't sure what to make of it, but the cold was starting to numb his body, and the thought of warmth was too tempting to resist. Without saying another word, he slid into the sleeping bag beside her. As they lay there side by side under the cold, starry sky, Marcus couldn't help but wonder, who was this alien woman? Why was she here, in the middle of nowhere, on this strange and freezing planet? And most importantly, what would happen next? The night stretched on, and the cold no longer seemed to matter. An unlikely offering. The night air was bitterly cold, and yet the warmth from the fire and the alien girl beside Marcus made everything feel strangely still. He could feel her body's heat through the thin fabric of the sleeping bag, but it wasn't enough to shake the discomfort of their unfamiliar closeness. He wasn't sure what to think of her, but he couldn't deny the kindness in her gesture. She had offered him her only warmth without hesitation. As they lay there, the fire crackling softly between them, Marcus tried to steady his breathing. His thoughts were a whirlwind. His mission, his crew, his ship. Everything felt so distant, so irrelevant now. Here he was with a strange alien on a cold, desolate planet, not knowing what would come next. The girl beside him shifted slightly, her silvery hair catching the glow of the fire. He noticed now how it shimmered, almost like stardust. She hadn't said much since she offered him the sleeping bag, and her silence felt heavier than the cold. Her eyes were closed for a moment, but she opened them again and turned her head toward him. Her expression was soft, but there was an undeniable sadness there. "Why are you here?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence. His voice was low, careful. He didn't know what to expect from her, but the question had been nagging at him for a while now. "You're alone. What happened to your people?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked into the fire, her face distant. For a moment, Marcus thought she might not speak at all. But then she slowly exhaled and, in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, said, "I was exiled." Marcus raised an eyebrow, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "Exiled? From where?" She didn't look at him as she spoke, but Marcus could tell the words were hard for her. "I was part of a group, a tribe of sorts, but they didn't accept me. I was different." Her voice faltered. "I had no choice but to leave." Marcus felt a pang of sympathy for her. "So, you've been out here alone. For how long?" "A long time," she replied softly, her eyes staring ahead. But Marcus could see the way her hands fidgeted with the fabric of the sleeping bag. It's hard to keep track of time when you have no one. The days blur together. Her words hung in the air, and Marcus couldn't help but wonder how anyone could survive so long in such isolation. He had only been on this planet for a day or two, and he already felt the crushing weight of solitude. But this girl, she had been exiled, abandoned, forced to wander alone in a world so harsh it could break even the strongest spirit. He watched her closely, his mind racing. She was strong. He could tell by the way she carried herself even in such a vulnerable state. But what did it take for someone to be cast away like this? And why had she reached out to him? The question lingered in his mind, and before he could stop himself, he spoke again. "Why did you offer to share your sleeping bag with me?" His voice was a little hesitant, unsure. You don't even know me. She turned her head toward him then, her blue eyes locking onto his. There was no fear in her gaze, only a strange kind of acceptance. I know what it's like to be cold and alone, she said simply. I didn't want you to suffer. Marcus blinked, taken aback by the simplicity of her response. It wasn't what he had expected, but there was something deeply genuine in the way she spoke. She wasn't offering him something out of duty or obligation. She was offering him warmth because she understood what it felt like to be lost, to have nothing. For a moment, Marcus just stared at her. He had been so focused on his own survival, his own mission, that he hadn't considered the possibility of someone else feeling the same way he did, out of place, desperate, just trying to make it through. But here was this alien girl, with nothing but a fire and a sleeping bag to offer, extending the very kindness that had eluded him. I don't know how to thank you, Marcus said, his voice a little rough. He wasn't sure what else to say. What could he possibly offer her in return? You don't have to thank me, she replied softly, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Just stay warm. Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude he hadn't expected to feel. He had been so focused on his mission, on surviving the cold, that he hadn't noticed the humanity, or the alien humanity, in the girl beside him. And then, as if to break the tension, she shifted and spoke again, her voice light but still carrying the weight of her experience. If you want, I can tell you about my people, about why I was exiled. Marcus sat up a little straighter, intrigued. This was the first real conversation he'd had in what felt like ages. The thought of learning more about her world, felt like the only thing that could make the night feel less like a nightmare. I'd like that, he said, his voice sincere. Tell me more. And so, under the cold, indifferent stars, with the fire crackling between them, the alien girl began to share the story of her past. She spoke of her tribe, her people, and the unforgiving nature of their customs. She told him of how she had been different, how she had been cast aside when she could no longer conform to their rules. As Marcus listened, he realized that the bond between them was beginning to grow, small but undeniable. In that moment, surrounded by the cold and the dark, the fire was the only thing that kept them from being lost. And maybe, just maybe, the kindness between them could light the way to something more. The midnight conversation. The fire crackled softly as the wind howled through the dark alien forest. Its eerie calls echoed across the desolate landscape. But in the small circle of warmth by the fire, Marcus and Lyra remained, lost in a rare moment of peace. The world around them seemed cold and distant, but in that brief interlude, their shared silence offered an unexpected comfort. Marcus watched her closely. There was still so much he didn't understand about her, about the strange world they both found themselves in. Her eyes reflected the fire's glow, shifting from a soft blue to almost silver in the light. She was different from anything he had ever encountered. Beautiful, but in a way that was almost unsettling. Her features weren't like human features, yet there was something strikingly familiar about her, as if some part of her reminded him of a story long forgotten. Her voice broke the silence again, soft but steady, like the rustling of leaves. I didn't always look like this. Marcus turned to her, startled by the sudden change in the direction of the conversation. She wasn't looking at him, her eyes still fixed on the fire. What do you mean? He asked, his curiosity piqued. Her lips parted slightly and she hesitated as though choosing her words carefully. My people, we are changelings. We can transform our appearance, our form. But when I was young, I didn't understand that I was different. I thought I was like them. I thought I was just like everyone else. Marcus shifted slightly, intrigued. So, you weren't always this? He gestured gently toward her. She nodded slowly, her gaze flickering to her hands as if to confirm the truth of her words. No, I once looked like them, like the rest of my tribe. But I began to change. My skin, it grew brighter, almost like the stars. My hair, It shifted from black to silver. I couldn't stop it. At first, they thought it was a gift, a blessing from the gods, but then they started to fear me. Fear you? Marcus repeated, unable to hide the surprise in his voice. Why? Her expression darkened, her eyes narrowing just slightly as the memory clearly took hold. Because they saw it as a sign of weakness. We were a proud people, ruled by tradition and fear of the unknown. My changes, they made them think I was no longer one of them. They thought I would bring ruin to the tribe. So they exiled me. Her voice trembled, but she quickly regained control, her calmness returning like a shield. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he listened. Exiled. Cast out. It wasn't just the cold of the planet that made her a refugee. It was the very people she had once called her own. I'm sorry, he said softly, unsure of how else to respond. That must have been terrible. Lyra gave him a small, fleeting smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. I learned to survive. The planet is harsh, but it is also beautiful in its own way. It has taught me more than my tribe ever could. I've learned to appreciate what's different, even in myself. Marcus could feel the weight of her words settling in the space between them. She wasn't just a lost soul. She was a survivor, someone who had been forced to adapt, to embrace the very differences that had made her an outcast. There was a long pause as Marcus thought about her words. The fire continued to crackle, its orange light flickering, casting strange shadows on their faces. As he looked at her, he realized that this alien girl, this mysterious being who had offered him warmth and shelter, was more than just a stranger, on a distant world. She had been through unimaginable things, and yet here she was, with him in the middle of the night, sharing her story. Lyra, Marcus began, his voice careful. Why did you help me? I'm just an outsider, a human you've never met. What makes me different? She looked at him then, her glowing blue eyes locking with his. For a moment there was something almost ancient in her gaze, something that made Marcus feel as though she had seen 1,000 lifetimes. You're not so different from me, she said quietly. You're lost, just like I was, just like I am. And I've learned that when you find someone who's lost, you don't turn them away. You help them find their way. Her words struck Marcus with unexpected force. He wasn't sure why, but something about them felt so raw, so real. He had spent so much time focused on his mission, on the next step, the next objective. But here now, with Lyra, he realized that his journey was no longer about exploration or survival. It was about connection, about finding someone who understood what it was like to be alone in the vast, indifferent universe. The thought hung in the air between them. Marcus opened his mouth to speak again, but before he could, a sudden sound interrupted their conversation. A distant, low rumble that shook the ground beneath them. It was too far off to be anything dangerous, but it was enough to pull them both from their moment of quiet reflection. Lyra's head snapped up, her eyes wide, and she quickly pushed herself up from the ground, her gaze scanning the horizon. The sense of calm that had settled between them shattered in an instant. What's wrong? Marcus asked, alarm rising in his chest. I don't know, Lyra replied, her voice tense. But we need to move. Now. Her sudden urgency caught Marcus off guard. Without waiting for another word, she grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. She moved quickly, her senses alert, her body tense like an animal preparing for a fight. As Marcus followed her, he could only wonder what had caused the sudden shift in her demeanor. What danger was approaching now? And more importantly, what would they do when it arrived? A new danger approaches. The ground trembled again, this time with more force. It wasn't the wind or the shifting of the trees. There was something else out there, something much larger. Marcus could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, the hairs prickling with an instinctive sense of danger. Lyra, too, had gone rigid beside him, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the horizon. Whatever it wasn't natural. It was coming for them. Her grip on his arm tightened, and Marcus felt her muscles tense, preparing for something he couldn't see. Stay close, she whispered, her voice low and urgent. Don't make a sound. Marcus nodded, heart pounding. He was used to danger, used to the threats of strange worlds, but this felt different. The ground vibrated again, a low rumbling that seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. He could see the way the trees trembled in response to the unknown presence, their branches shaking as if in terror. What is it? Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. I don't know, Lyra murmured, her gaze fixed on the distant tree line, her posture becoming more defensive. But I've seen this before. The ground shakes when they come. Who are they? Marcus asked, his pulse quickening. What are we dealing with? Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line, her expression hardening as her eyes glinted with fear. Predators, not like anything you've ever encountered. They hunt in packs, they can smell weakness from miles away. She glanced at Marcus, her eyes searching his face. You need to stay calm. Whatever happens, don't run. Before Marcus could respond, there was another rumble, much closer, this time. It was like the earth itself was being torn apart by the force of something massive moving through it. A terrifying sound, a low, guttural growl, echoed in the distance, reverberating off the trees and making Marcus's skin crawl. He had never heard anything like it, but instinctively he knew it was a sound of death. Lyra's eyes flicked to the fire, which was now burning low. She seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if calculating the risks, before she moved swiftly to the edge of the clearing, pulling Marcus with her. She reached down and grabbed a small glowing orb from her pack, a piece of technology that Marcus hadn't noticed before. It hummed faintly, casting a soft light in the dark. What is that? Marcus asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. It's a signal jammer, she replied, not meeting his eyes. It disrupts their tracking devices, keeps them from detecting us for a short time. She turned to face him, her eyes suddenly serious. But it won't hold them off forever. Marcus felt his stomach drop. How long? A few minutes at best. The growl echoed louder, closer now. Someone was out there, getting nearer with each passing second. The shadows in the forest seemed to shift unnaturally, as though something large and dangerous was stalking them from the dark. Marcus could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on them, the tension thick in the air as they waited for whatever was coming. And then, like a shadow falling across the moon, it emerged. From the trees ahead of them, a massive figure stepped into the clearing. It was large, unnaturally large, its body covered in thick dark fur that bristled as it moved. Its eyes glowed with an eerie yellow light, like twin lanterns in the darkness. Its face was a twisted mask of hunger, the sharp fangs glinting. In the dim firelight as it snarled, its breath coming in ragged, hot gasps. Behind it there was another, and another. The ground was shaking with the weight of the approaching beasts, the pack closing in, their glowing eyes flicking between Marcus and Lyra. We need to move, Lyra hissed, her hand pulling at Marcus's sleeve. Now! Before Marcus could react, the first creature lunged toward them, its claws outstretched. Lyra's instincts kicked in, and with a swift, fluid motion, she pushed Marcus back into the shadows, just as the beast's claws slashed through the air where he had been, standing. The force of its strike sent a spray of dirt and snow into the air, and Marcus barely had time to catch his breath before Lyra was pulling him again. They ran, the sound of the creature's snarls echoing behind them. Marcus's legs burned with the effort, but he didn't dare look back. All he could hear was the pounding of their massive paws against the ground, the sound of their hungry growls growing louder with every passing second. Lyra's pace was unrelenting, her sharp eyes scanning the terrain ahead as she darted between the trees, dragging Marcus with her. They came to a small ridge, and Lyra turned sharply, pushing Marcus ahead of her. Climb, she ordered, pointing to a jagged rock face just ahead. Hurry. Marcus didn't need any more encouragement. He grabbed onto the rock and pulled himself up, his hands slipping on the icy surface as his heart raced in his chest. Lyra was right. Behind him, her movements fluid and practiced. She moved with an agility he couldn't match, scaling the rocks like a creature born for this world. As they reached the top of the ridge, Marcus looked down, his breath catching in his throat. The pack of creatures had reached the base of the rock, their growls sending ripples through the air. They circled the base, their yellow eyes locked onto their prey. But the creatures couldn't climb. Not yet. Lyra crouched beside Marcus, her eyes scanning the clearing below, watching the beasts with a kind of calm that sent a chill down his spine. She knew what they were capable of. She had fought them before. "They won't stop," Lyra whispered, her voice steady but filled with the knowledge of the dangers that lay ahead. "They'll keep coming until they've taken what they want." Marcus swallowed hard. He had no idea what these creatures were or why they were hunting them. All he knew was that they were in grave danger. And unless they found a way to escape, this night would be their last. The chase. The cold air felt even harsher now, biting at Marcus's exposed skin as he clung to the rock ledge, watching the creatures below. Their eyes glowed like twin lanterns in the dark, their mouths wide with hunger, their growls vibrating through the air. Marcus could feel the weight of their gaze as they circled the base of the ridge, searching for a way to reach them. But for now, the rock face was their barrier. Lyra's grip on the ledge was firm as she crouched beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the creatures below. She didn't seem rattled, but Marcus could see the tension in her every muscle, the readiness to leap into action. She had faced these monsters before and she knew they would not give up easily. "We need to move," Lyra said quietly, but there was an urgency in her voice. She glanced around the ridge, looking for their next move. "They're smart. They'll find another way up soon." Marcus didn't need any more prompting. His heart was already racing and fear began to claw at him. The creatures were only moments away from finding a way up, and he knew the only option was to keep running. But where? The ridge was high, and there was nothing nearby for cover. The vast open landscape stretched out before them like an endless expanse of danger. Lyra turned toward him, her expression intense. "Follow me. And don't look back." Before he could say anything, she sprang forward, her body a blur as she leaped from the ridge and landed on a narrow ledge below them. Her movements were smooth and calculated, honed by years of survival on this hostile planet. Marcus watched her, feeling a mix of awe and panic. He didn't hesitate. He followed. The moment his feet hit the narrow ledge, he felt the ground tremble beneath him. It wasn't just the shaking of the earth that had become so familiar. It was the pounding of the creature's paws, charging up the slope behind them. They were closing in, and fast. Lyra moved with precision, leading the way through the jagged rocks and over uneven terrain. Marcus struggled to keep up, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the adrenaline surged through his veins. He could hear the creatures behind them now, closer, their snarls growing louder, their breath hot against the cold night air. "Go!" Lyra urged, her voice sharp as she darted around a sharp corner, disappearing into the shadows of a large outcrop of stone. Marcus pushed himself harder, leaping from one rock to another, trying to avoid the slick, icy patches that threatened to send him sliding into the abyss below. His muscles burned, his legs screamed in protest, but the fear that gripped him pushed him onward. Just as he rounded the corner, he saw her, Lyra, waiting for him at the base of another cliff, her eyes fixed on the sky. Her face was tense, scanning the horizon. "Come on, hurry," she hissed, pulling him toward a narrow passage that led deeper into the mountain. As they moved through the passage, Marcus could feel the air growing colder, sharper. The walls were slick with ice, the floor uneven and treacherous. He stumbled once, but Lyra caught him, keeping him on his feet. The sound of the creature's pursuit was muffled now, but Marcus could feel them drawing closer, could hear the pounding of their feet as they followed their scent. Lyra stopped suddenly, pressing a finger to her lips. She didn't speak, but her gesture was enough to make Marcus freeze in place. He could feel it too, the stillness in the air, the absence of sound. "Listen," she whispered. At first, Marcus heard nothing, But then, a low, ominous growl echoed through the passage. It was close. Too close. Lyra's eyes darted to the left, and Marcus followed her gaze. There was a narrow opening in the rock, a small crack in the wall that led to what looked like a larger cavern. She motioned for him to move quickly, and without hesitation, he slipped through the gap, his body pressing against the cold stone. They entered the cavern just as the first of the creatures rounded the bend. The beast was massive, its fur bristling, in the darkness. Its yellow eyes scanned the passage, and Marcus held his breath, praying it wouldn't see them. But the creature's gaze passed over them without stopping. It was more interested in the scent that lingered in the passage, and it moved on, its massive body slipping into the shadows. Marcus exhaled slowly, his heart pounding. He looked to Lyra, who was already moving deeper into the cavern. Her pace was slow now, cautious, as if she didn't trust the silence around them. "We're safe. For now," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus couldn't bring himself to speak. He was still too shaken by the close call. His mind was racing, but it couldn't catch up with the terror he had just experienced. He looked around the cavern, trying to make sense of their surroundings. The walls were smooth, almost polished, in places, but they were dark, like the very stone had been burned by the passage of time. Lyra led him deeper into the cavern, moving with practiced ease. Marcus struggled to keep up, his body sore from the sprint, his mind still racing with fear. They passed through several twists and turns in the cavern until they reached what appeared to be a natural hollow, a small pocket in the rock. The sound of the creature's pursuit was muffled now, as though the cavern walls had swallowed it whole. Lyra crouched in the hollow, motioning for Marcus to do the same. He followed her, his body stiff with exhaustion. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind only the ache of his muscles and the pounding of his heart. "They'll keep looking," Lyra said, her voice soft. "But they won't find us here, not for a while." Marcus nodded, but the unease still gnawed at him. The creatures were relentless, and he had no idea how long they could remain hidden in this cavern. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice hoarse. "We can't stay here forever." Lyra's gaze was unreadable as she studied him. "We won't," she said softly. "But for now, we wait, and hope they give up." Escape plan. The darkness of the cavern pressed in on them, thick and suffocating. Marcus could hear nothing but the sound of his own breath, the pounding of his heart, and the distant rumble of the creatures somewhere beyond the walls. The air was still cool, but it carried with it the weight of something just as heavy as the silence. Time. Lyra sat cross-legged, her back against the rock, her eyes closed as if listening to some inner rhythm only she could hear. Her expression was unreadable, but Marcus could see the way her jaw clenched slightly, the tension in her shoulders. She was calculating. He could tell she was always calculating. For a moment, he just watched her. The firelight of the previous night. The fear, the danger. They felt like distant memories now. It was hard to reconcile the image of the fierce, independent woman beside him with the girl who had shared her warmth and offered him kindness. Yet, deep down, Marcus knew this was the only version of her that mattered now, the one that survived. Lyra shifted slightly, breaking his thoughts. Her eyes snapped open, and for the first time in what felt like hours, she looked directly at him. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Not for long. They'll find us, and when they do, it won't be the same. It will be worse." Marcus nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. He hadn't needed to hear it. He had known it already. The predators would never give up, never stop hunting. They'd keep coming, and he didn't want to wait around to see what would happen when they finally did find them. "Do you have a plan?" Marcus asked quietly, his voice low in the stillness of the cavern. "What are we going to do?" Lyra stood up, her movements smooth and precise, like a well-oiled machine. Her gaze was far off for a moment, scanning the cave walls, the narrow paths that twisted through the rock. Then, without looking at him, she answered, "We need to move deeper, but we can't risk going out the way we came. They're too close. Marcus stood as well, his legs sore from their earlier sprint. The adrenaline was fading now, and all he wanted was to sit down, rest, but he knew that was impossible. The moment they stopped moving, they were vulnerable. They needed to act fast. "How far do we need to go?" he asked. "A few miles. There's an old passage I know of," she replied. "It's dangerous, but it's the only way out." Marcus didn't ask for details. He had no idea where they were going, and at this point, it didn't matter. They just needed to leave. He glanced at her. Lyra was already moving again, slipping through a narrow gap in the rock. She didn't wait for him, didn't look back. She was used to this kind of life, used to surviving in the harshest of environments. With no other choice, Marcus followed. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for them to move side by side. The rock walls seemed to close in, pressing on them with an oppressive force. The air was colder here, the silence louder. Marcus could hear the soft scraping of Lyra's boots as she moved ahead, her movements fluid, almost graceful, while he stumbled more often, trying to keep his footing in the dim light. They moved quickly, not speaking. The sound of their steps echoed off the walls, reminding Marcus of how exposed they were. The further they went, the darker it became. The passage twisted and turned, and with every bend it felt like they were sinking deeper into the heart of the planet. The air grew thick, almost stifling, as if the rock itself was closing in around them, trapping them in its ancient grip. "How much further?" Marcus asked after what felt like an eternity of winding tunnels and sharp turns. "Not much," Lyra replied, her voice calm but laced with urgency. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the darkness behind them. "Stay close." They reached a larger cavern soon after. The opening was wider, the walls uneven and jagged, the floor scattered with loose stones. Marcus took a deep breath. The air colder here, but the space felt different. Almost safe. Lyra stopped just inside the cavern, her posture alert. She crouched beside a large boulder, signaling for Marcus to do the same. "We need to rest. For a moment," she whispered. "But we can't stop for long. They could be on our trail any second." Marcus didn't argue. He was exhausted, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself a moment to breathe. He slid down against the rock, his back pressed against the cold stone. The muscles in his legs screamed in protest, and his mind was a blur of thoughts. He was alive. They were alive. But for how long? Lyra moved with practiced ease, pulling something from her pack, a small, silver device. She pressed a button, and a soft light emitted from it, illuminating the cavern around them. Her gaze flicked to Marcus briefly, and she said, "It's a locator." "We're getting close." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Locator?" Lyra nodded, the faintest hint of a smile playing on her lips. "It's a personal beacon, a way to navigate the underground tunnels. I use it when I need to get out of here quickly." Marcus let out a small sigh of relief. It wasn't much, but it was something. "We'll keep moving in a few minutes," Lyra continued. "But first we need to decide, are we staying hidden or are we making a break for it?" Marcus blinked, processing her words. He hadn't even considered the possibility of staying hidden. They were being hunted after all. But the more he thought about it, the more the idea made sense. They couldn't outrun the creatures forever. They had to find a way to outsmart them. "What do you suggest?" Marcus asked. Lyra looked at him then, her eyes focused and sharp. "We wait until they're close enough to think we're gone. Then we slip out the back. They'll expect us to keep running, but we'll be waiting for them." Marcus stared at her, impressed by the clarity of her plan. It wasn't the safest option, but it was a chance. A slim one, but a chance. He nodded. "Let's do it." And for the first time since they had encountered the creatures, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but in a world like this, it was everything. A lifeline. The cave was quiet now, too quiet. The oppressive silence seemed to stretch on forever, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the cavern's ceiling and the rhythmic beating of Marcus's heart. He sat with his back against the cold stone, trying to steady his breath. But his thoughts were racing. They had come so far, but the night was far from over. Every moment felt like an eternity, the weight of their decision pressing on him with each passing second. Lyra was still in motion, her sharp eyes scanning the cavern's entrance, her body coiled with tension. She had been on edge since they'd entered this part of the underground system. Marcus could see the uncertainty in her. She was used to survival, but even she couldn't predict what would come next. The creatures, the predators, were relentless. They wouldn't stop. Not unless... They had no choice. How long? Marcus asked, his voice low but tinged with the frustration of not knowing how much longer they could hide. Lyra glanced over at him, her eyes momentarily softening. They'll search for hours, but they won't stop looking until they think we've given up. Then why are we waiting? Marcus replied, his impatience getting the better of him. We could outrun them, No. Lyra interrupted, her tone sharper than he expected. Running now would be a death sentence. They'll hunt us down, track our every move. We have to think smarter. Marcus bit back his words, staring at the ground. She was right, of course. They couldn't afford to be reckless. But the fear in the pit of his stomach was growing, tightening with every passing moment. He hated being cornered, hated the feeling of waiting for something he couldn't control. Lyra moved toward him slowly, her movements calm but precise. She knelt beside him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him pause. Listen to me, Marcus. I know this isn't easy, but if we want to survive this, we have to use their own instincts against them. Marcus swallowed hard, his mind reeling from her words. She was asking him to trust her, to believe in her strategy. And in that moment he realized something. He did trust her. He had no choice but to. She was the only person who knew how to navigate this hellish landscape. She was the only reason they were still alive. What do we do then? Marcus asked, his voice steady now, as he finally accepted the fact that he had no better option than to follow her lead. Lyra's lips quirked into a small, wry smile. We wait. And when they think they've driven us to a corner, we strike back. The plan. Lyra moved toward a darker part of the cavern, retrieving a pack from her shoulder. The glow of the small beacon she carried illuminated her face as she began rummaging through it. Marcus stayed close, his eyes shifting from her to the opening of the cavern, his instincts screaming at him to act, to escape. But he knew Lyra was right. They couldn't just run. The creatures knew their scent, and no amount of speed would outrun that. He needed to be patient, a lesson he had never been good at learning. What's the plan? Marcus asked, trying to keep his mind focused. Lyra pulled out several items from her pack. The first was a small rounded stone with strange markings etched into it, glowing faintly. She pressed it into the palm of her hand, and Marcus saw the rock vibrate ever so slightly, almost imperceptible, but enough to make him pause. Poison? He guessed, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra shook her head. No, not poison. This, she held it up, is a signal disruptor. It will scramble their senses, make them think we're somewhere else. A decoy? Marcus asked, his eyes narrowing, with understanding. Exactly, Lyra said, her smile widening. It's risky, but it'll work. For a little while, at least. She slipped the device into a crevice near the cavern's entrance where the creatures would be most likely to approach. The glow of the device was soft but deliberate, sending out a pulse of energy that Marcus couldn't see but could feel. It was like a pulse of electricity in the air, tingling against his skin. We wait for them to investigate the signal, Lyra said quietly. And while they're distracted, we make our move. Marcus nodded, his mind trying to calculate the odds of their success. It wasn't much, but it was the best chance they had, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. The moment of truth. The air in the cavern felt heavier now, each passing second stretching into eternity. The faint hum of the signal disruptor was the only sound, vibrating through the stone walls, making Marcus's ears ring. He could hear his own breath, shallow and quick, but he forced himself to steady it. The silence stretched on, unbearable, and then it came. The low, guttural growls of the creatures reached them first, vibrating through the walls like a distant thunderstorm. Marcus's heart leaped into his throat, but Lyra didn't flinch. She was waiting, her eyes locked on the entrance, poised for the moment they would break free. He felt the ground tremble beneath him again. Closer this time. The creatures were nearing. They had found the signal. Lyra stood suddenly, her movements quick and deliberate. She grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him to his feet. "Now," she hissed, and they both sprang into motion. With the signal disruptor still pulsing behind them, they sprinted through the cavern's narrow path, Lyra leading the way with her sure-footed pace. Marcus followed, his breath coming in ragged gasps, the adrenaline pushing him forward even as his muscles screamed in protest. Behind them, the creatures howled in frustration, disoriented by the signal. They were too slow to react. Lyra's plan was working. As they emerged from the cavern, Marcus could see the faintest glimmer of daylight far ahead, a distant shimmer that seemed impossibly close, like a promise. The creatures were still behind them, their roars growing louder, but now they were scattered, unsure, confused by the trick Lyra had played on them. They were almost there. But then the ground beneath them shifted again. The predators were closing in faster than Marcus had anticipated. A quick glance to his left revealed one of the creatures, closer now, its massive form looming in the shadows. Lyra's eyes met his in that split second, her expression determined. "Run. Don't look back." And so they did. As the beast charged forward, their feet pounding the earth, Marcus didn't dare look back. They had to make it. There was no other option.